Thank you, and I'm sure glad you're the ones who have to carry all this restriction and restraint forward. We just kind of launch the missile, and then you particularize and talk to your neighbors and get them to do it. And I really want to thank you for that. We do have a challenge, you know that. All of you know lots more about water than we here in Sacramento, and you're dealing with it. And just in this room, the diversity of what we're dealing with is so great that it's hard to generalize. And yet we do have to say we need to cut back 25%, that's the goal, and then how does that play out from the Oregon border to the Mexican border, with a lot of different consequences and impacts and variations. So you're in the front lines, you know that, and we're here to back you up. We worked on Proposition 1 together, overwhelming support on the part of the people, and what is critical about that proposition was that it was embodied in a water action plan. That was the whole context of the water bond. It wasn't just things patched together to get some votes in the legislature, but rather it was the result of many discussions and debates and thinking through what do we really need, what can we do over the next few years together. And that's what Proposition 1 has set in motion. Now, through the grants and through the other things that it makes available, we're going forward. And you're very critical to that. Water is something I guess everyone, I don't know, I guess it was Mark Twain who said, you know, water is, what is it, wine's for drinking and water is for fighting. And the water law, I can remember my father when he was Attorney General telling me all about the Arizona versus California case, the Supreme Court argument there that was taking place in the 50s. So I've been hearing about water for most of my life, and I've had the opportunity to deal with it as governor now these many years. And these things, it's kind of deja vu all over again, because we have the same kind of issues and debates. There they are. But California doesn't sit still. It was, I think we had about 24 million people when I was governor. We had about 12 or 13 million people when my father was first governor. Now we have 39 million. So we have all these people. And we've got 32 million vehicles going up the highways. And they're spewing out, or they're burning up 332 billion gallons of gasoline and diesel, and all that is making a different kind of world and environment. Things are not staying the same. We know that. And California, you know, if you go back in history, I think it's very valuable to go look at what California was in the past. It's good to understand what your neighborhood was in the past. And things are definitely changing. And with the number of people, the number of technologies, and the impact. So what that means is we don't stay the same. We got to change. Now how we use water is not exempt from that constant evolutionary process. So I would just say this drought is very much a part of California's past and future. We get droughts. And with climate change, it's coming. I don't know how many climate skeptics we have in this room. I imagine we have a certain number. But well over 90%, some people say 97% of climate scientists are all agreed. And more particularly, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, when they put out their 5th report, and when Stanford, particularly and other universities, advance their research, they all come out with California and the West here being very dry and being hot. So we've had droughts before, but now we have droughts and higher temperatures, and therefore the ground's going to get drier, and the forests are going to get drier, we're going to have more fires. You all know the fire season is much, much longer than it used to be. I saw a statistic the other day that California is 4 degrees warmer than the historic average. So things are changing, and we need to change. And this drought is the catalyst for that. But this is a place of incredible creativity. The most obvious example is Silicon Valley. where the microprocessor was invented, Bob Noyes and other people, right here in California, and the ability to reduce what required, you know, a large portion of this room to compute now is done on a fraction of your fingernail. I mean, so we're getting, with less material, we're getting more output, more work. And that's what we have to do. We have to learn how to extract more value with less material throughput. That's the big picture. And water plays a role in that. So people who look at this say that there's millions of acre feet that can be saved and gathered from efficiency in the agricultural sector. There's 1.5 million acre feet that we could get from recycling urban wastewater. And then stormwater, that's another million acre feet. Now, having calculated that is a long distance from actually making it happen, and all the issues and technologies and institutional constraints. But there is water usage that we haven't even dreamed of yet. And there are plenty of examples of recycling. Orange County's got that big recycling plant that I visited, and we're gonna have to do more of that. And that's gonna take money. And this is a problem. People don't like to think about the fact that we have to invest in things. I mean, even if you take an analogous challenge, driving cars. You know, I've made a goal for the next 15 years, we cut our petroleum use 50%. Well, what happens when we cut our petroleum? That means 50% less gas, 50% less gas tax. But the roads are still being driven on, either by electric cars or by highly efficient combustion cars. So how are we going to do that? Well, we got to find a way to handle that. Same with the water. You may have 25% less water, but you still got the pipes, you got the services, you got the technology. That's the way life is. And we got to deal with that. When you have more people with more economic activity and more throughput, you have to get more efficient. And we are getting more efficient, a lot more efficient. So, in fact, when we talk about making our toilets more efficient, not something we like to talk about, but I remember the first year I signed a bill to make our toilets, the flush, use less water. In fact, when I was campaigning for president in Maryland in 1976, I used to talk about that. And people got very excited. I can't remember why. But people would look at me there, I don't know where the moonbeam came from, or small is beautiful. But I did say, even then, that we have to live more efficient. In fact, there's this metaphor that was used in those days, spaceship Earth, that's where moonbeam came from. But if you think of a spaceship, you probably don't like to think of a spaceship. How do they do it, by the way? You know, every day you got to do it, right? And they're in that little spaceship and they're not coming down. I don't think they put it out the door. So that's called recycling and reusing. So we're on a spaceship, we just don't know it. It is used. Everything goes somewhere. We didn't know that. Before we thought you actually just dump it. Yeah, I remember once when I was a little kid, my mother wanted me to clean up all these old Christmas cards, so I just put them in a big bag in my car and I went and dumped them someplace. And what's the end of that? Well, the problem is they all had our address. So I don't know who called them, but somebody called my mother. It was very embarrassing. Tried to go pick them up, find another way to dispose of it. So the point is, there's always a somewhere. You know, we can't just throw things away. We got to use it. And that's true of the water. And we're doing that more and more. And people complain about almonds or something, you know. Okay. Well, what are we going to do? Take quicker showers so we can have more almonds. But people in Asia can have more almonds. Well, you know, I got hammered on national television about this. But let's say, okay, let's control almonds. Who's going to control almonds? We control almonds, how about broccoli? How about steaks? How about our whole life? So we have to have this balance between setting these goals so that we can live with the resources we have, but having the maximum degree of individual liberty and a diversity of decision making. And that's exactly the way we're doing the water. We're setting some goals, and we're hopefully providing some incentives through Proposition 1 and maybe other things, regulatory changes, because you've got to build some things, and sometimes CEQA and other permit constraints slow it down. We've got to speed that up. And we got to work on all of it. And we got to get water to people, but we also got to realize we do have this is not just a plastic bubble that we live in. It's a natural environment. And we have a thin soil below that we walk on. We have a thin atmosphere, relatively thin, above us. And how we handle that is how we do. And we are embedded in this web of life. And some people say, well, don't worry about the fish. We just worry about people. Well, we do worry about people. But we have to take notice of the fact that in 1975, when I was governor the first time, only 8% of the fish were extinct, the native fish were extinct, or highly vulnerable. Today, it's 31%, and that's going to keep climbing. So that's an indicator that we're stressing the system, and we're going to have to design our way through all this to preserve the diversity of species and to provide the basis of economic activity and strength. And that's what we're doing. And this stuff gets complicated. This Delta project, that some people say it's one of my pet projects. It's not true. It's a challenge that's needed to deal with California's water. So I'm here to deal with the problems that I'm given. I didn't invent these problems. In fact, I'd be happy if there were no problems. Of course, then you'd wonder why we're paying a governor if there are no problems. But these problems have been around a long time. I think this Delta conveyance. Goodwin Knight was dealing with this. And so was my father. And so was I. Back in the good old 70s. And we're running the same issues. I asked my water man sitting over here, how many man hours and woman hours go into the Delta project? What'd you tell me? 1 million. Okay, until you put 1 million hours into it, shut up. Because you know what the hell you're talking about. You know, it's government, they sit there and they play tiddlywinks or whatever the hell they do. No, these are serious people, and let's assume they wasted a quarter of the time. They were on their cell phones. Still 750,000 man hours, that's a lot of stuff. And it's tens of thousands of pages, so it's complicated. And on this subject, we do want to be thoughtful and see what's going on here. And we're not doing it just to have something to do. We have a lot to do. But we're doing this Delta project because for 50 years, people have been trying to figure out how do we deal with the fish, how do we deal with the conveyance of water, what's the most efficient way to do it, what protects all the different interests that we got to think about. So that's why we're doing it. And all the things that I do here are because they're problems, and we need to deal with it. If I don't need to deal with it, somebody else has. So I dealt with it, Delta, and what happened? The next 4 governors weren't able to deal with it. Schwarzenegger, sorry, he had probably spent $500,000. His people spent half the time. So, or maybe we're spending more time. I don't know. But the point is, we got real issues. We got 38 million people. We got a gross domestic product of 2.2 trillion. We're the 7th largest economic entity in the world. And we have resources, and we have problems. And if these problems aren't handled, they get worse, and they don't go away. And if I don't handle this Delta project this time, I'll just have to come back and run for governor 40 years later, like I did this time. That might take some Jesuitical exist. But anyway, yeah, you can't do this thing too many times. I got that. And we're running out of time. So we're getting serious. We're going to make it happen. And we're listening to people. And so there it is. Anyway, what more can I say here? I said we want to make it easier for you to build some things and all your diverse projects that you have to satisfy these water constraints. Because if we're going to do recycling or wastewater or capturing stormwater, we're going to have to spend some money. And you got to have some ways of getting that money, and we're going to do our best to help you do that. But I think the big takeaway is the people have been writing the obituary for California for a long time. Many, many years. I remember reading the Look magazine had an article, I think 1965, said that the bloom's off the rose, California's going down. Now they've said it many times, but if you just look at where we are, the California, since the recovery started, since the bottom of the recession, we have done better in terms of economic growth and jobs than the national average. So we are still a pace setter. And when it comes to ideas, if you look at venture capital, where it goes, particularly in alternative energy, it's coming to California. We're getting about half of it. We look at Nobel Prizes, we're getting more than any other state by a factor of 4. So this is a very inventive place. People come here. I once talked to a guy in Silicon Valley who started 3 businesses. He was from India. I said, why do you come to California? Are the taxes too high? Regulations too burdensome? He said, no, I come here because there's no place in the world that has as many smart people with as many smart people who know how to spend that smart money. And that's what we got. We have resources, and we have very talented people willing to try things and invent things and fail. That's another thing. You can fail. Now, it's pretty hard to fail in politics and become a success. But I've proven you can do that. So I am just like an entrepreneur. Disruptive, innovative, but still here. And still inventive. So I just leave you one thought, and this is bad when you start quoting yourself. This is my little inauguration speech, which I worked diligently on. But I quoted Edward O. Wilson, who was a very famous naturalist, biologist. Actually, he's an expert on ants. That's his big, especially ants. By the way, the ants, their prospects look pretty good, by the way. They're not facing extinction. But he's really a very wise person in terms of the species and biodiversity and habitat and all that. Here's what he had to say. I'm just going to read 4 lines. And that'll be all. This is my parting takeaway message for you. Surely one moral precept we can agree on is to stop destroying our birthplace, the only humanity we'll ever have. We are needlessly turning the gold, think of golden California, we're needlessly turning the gold we inherited from our forebears into straw. And for that, we will be despised by our descendants. Well, we're not going to let that happen. In California, we're dealing with water, we're dealing with the problems of agriculture, we're dealing with the problems in the Central Valley where people don't have any clean water at all. We're dealing with all the issues that face us. And the fact that they're a little troublesome is just a greater stimulus to our own wise response. And so I think we can all be grateful and be excited that we're in a place, yes, with some really unique problems, but we got some great problem solvers, some real adventurers and inventors and good stewards of what we've all received. And by God, we're going to make it better from what it was. That's my commitment. Thank you very much.
Now say the motto for life is the ants go marching on. Fact is, Governor, you have shown tremendous leadership. Not everybody's going to agree with you. I don't agree with my wife all the time, but she calls that something else. fact, but you have shown the vision and leadership. This is what California needs, and we really appreciate it. So we have two things for you. This can go on your wall, or probably all your plaques. These are photos over the years of your water activities. And before you head out, we have one more thing. I asked where his dog was, and he said the dog would bark when people clapped. And I said, that's good. I said, no, it's not. So we have a center bowl for Save Our Water, where we take a full allotment of water.
Okay.